Hello my friends, I'm Lucas and you're watching coldemonspl. If you like my work, please remember to click thumb up, subscribe to my channel and write some comments.
First of all, I would like to mention my wonderful patrons who support my activity. Massive thanks, guys! These are people who believed in my passion, saw something valuable in it and decided to support me. It's really great when you know that there are a few crazy guys in the world who think like you, want to watch what you do and appreciate the effect of your work. This is really super motivating and gives you the strength to continue working. Please don't forget that you can be one of them. Just check my Patreon page and decide if you want to stay with me or go back home. There are different options to join, but you need to decide by yourself. Once you join, you will be able to surf on my page with no limits, watch and download all superb high-resolution pictures, watch progress shots, check stories with unpublished in other media's models, read the articles, watch the videos with no adverts and enjoy other benefits. Thanks to this, I will try to give you some interesting content to keep you informed and entertained. I'm not pushing, but you know, I'd like to make millions from modeling and this is the easiest way. I'm joking of course, but the truth is that it would be great to do this as a regular job. The only way is to build the channel and get new patrons. That's why in each episode I encourage you to support me in my passion. And I realize it's not easy these days, but if you have a few bucks you could drop in my cup, that would be great. Thanks! I'm recording this in October 2023. Without a doubt, Takom has gained attention in recent months with a series of 3 Jagdpanzer Hetzer models. They released the version with a full interior, which may be tempting, plus beautiful box art, and in result, I'm really sure that this is the kit of this year. Well, the content provided by the manufacturer is one thing and the parts I need to build a model without interior are another. And that's exactly what fits in the 2 string bags you see right now. And of course some extras. 3D printed quick tracks, 2 sets of Aber photo-etched elements that I will try to fit to this model, masks for painting the wheels, a metal antenna with a socket and MG from master model and towing cables from Eureka XXL. Okay, this is how many elements are needed to build the hull, the lower parts of course. Everything fits together perfectly and you don't need much time to put it all together. The top plate above the engine and the roof of the fighting compartment are also well designed parts and don't require much. Before I glued both parts of the hull together, I removed the front fenders, which is much more convenient at this stage than when we have the entire hull in our hands. Also now I have prepared deeper grooves for new welds which are too flat and unnatural in the model. It's worth making a little upgrade in these places because the photos clearly show that the welders didn't spare any material. Of course I also made cutting marks for the armor plates, gently cutting them with a hobby knife and smoothing them with a thin plastic glue. The next work to be done before assembling the whole thing was to fill the holes for the side shields, which won't be needed in this model. I want to use winterketten, so covers are unnecessary. I used CA glue and CA glue filler from VMS. I also immediately removed the imitation tubes for spare antennas and added new ones. Before gluing the hull I also need to glue the periscopes. Here for the first time I checked how the Aber elements would fit. While the cover didn't cause any problems, attaching the periscopes required some work. As a result I replaced the parts with completely different ones. Fortunately the commander's periscopes fit without any problems and I immediately masked them with the masking tape. After gluing the plate above the engine I was able to glue the entire hull together. Everything still fits very well. The chassis set is also very well designed and I won't go into the errors it supposedly contains here. This is not important to me as long as the model stands evenly on the surface and assembles well. To tell you the truth, it took me more time to cut the pieces out of the frames and clean them than build them. Maybe because it was my second time doing it and I could build this model without any instructions. As I mentioned, I'm adding quick tracks in the winterketten version to this model, a unique composition but interesting enough to show it. Click the link in the description to see how fast they can be built and how they look like when assembled. And here you can see how they look on the model. Quite impressive, isn't it? I replaced the plastic handles with metal ones. It's a simple matter if we have the right tools and materials. Now it's time for the photo-etched mudguards. Please keep in mind that these parts are from 2001, so they are quite old and were designed for the ancient dragon model. But I need to try. It would be best if all the elements were soldered, but laziness won and I glued everything together with VMS glue. In such a simple construction this is not a problem. The end result is pretty good. I can say it's almost perfect. So now the rear fenders. Everything is beautiful, well designed and assembled quickly, but just wait couple seconds to see what is wrong. So what is wrong? About 1.5 mm is missing. I didn't want to give up these fenders, so I slightly modified the design of the hitch. I know it doesn't look right, but I chose fenders than the correct look. They can be bent nicely and look better than the plastic ones. Yes, it was a good solution after all. You probably know this method of making welds, so nothing new for those who watch my channel or others in the internet. I prepared sausages from green stuff and placed them in appropriate places, then shaped them with a toothpick, and in the end I prepared proper shape of welding with my sophisticated welding tool. That is a piece of profiled sheet metal glued to the toothpick. That's all. The missing element in all three Hetzer models is an air inlet cover, exactly the element that I'm currently preparing. Here I had to cut it a bit. As a result I have a cover and net that looks much better than the one in the model. It's true that the mesh doesn't fit perfectly, but it's still better than the one from the set. As I mentioned, I won't need side shields, but I need to make threaded rods to attach them to. It was enough to drill holes in the appropriate places and glue a piece of plastic profile there. I cut them all to the same size. I needed two clamps in this model and I used ready-made printed elements from T-Rex. The MG34 from Master Model is a great addition. There are two sets in the package. Here I have already used one for the previous build Hetzer. Two metal elements and one printed element significantly increase the quality of the machine gun, and it's really worth investing, especially if it's a visible element. Installation is very simple and as you can see the effect is worth the investment. The situation is similar with 2-meter antenna from the same manufacturer. Metal elements combined with 3D printed do a great job and there is probably nothing better on the market at the moment. Another addition are Eureka XXL towing cables intended for Hetzers and murder free. I guess there's no need to advertise them too much because everyone who watches my videos knows that I've always been using them because of their quality. The mantlet cover received 3 photo-etched screws that I glued into the drilled holes. They were definitely too shallow. The new cast texture is a simple acrylic putty applied to the surface and allowed to dry. Gentle sanding gives it the right appearance and we have a ready element to be glued to the model. The manufacturer has prepared delicate looking imitations of handles that are too small and of course cannot be handles. Therefore, after removing them, I marked where new elements should be placed and started working on shaping them. Contrary to appearances, it took me some time to figure out how to make them look identical and at the same time be the right size. I'm showing you a ready-made recipe on how to do it, so you don't have to waste time figuring it out. Oh, and I added a box for small items on the engine hatch. This is a resin piece from Eureka XXL. After gluing the handles, I'm almost at the end of the entire construction stage. What I was left with was adding stowage elements and figures. I made tarps, blankets and similar items from Tamiya epoxy putty. For me, this is one of the best products I have available. The most important element is the blanket that is to serve as a seat pad for the vehicle commander. In addition, I used the remaining pieces as a carelessly stuffed tarp and smaller racks in the box on the fender. So, as you can see, I always try to use all the prepared material, even waste. And speaking about figures, I used a slightly modified Panzer 38 figure from Tamiya as the commander. I replaced his head with a resin one and sculpted a sweater and sheepskin coat. The crew is a product of Stalingrad, and in the case of these two guys I didn't change much. Of course I had to work with a little on fitting two figures into one hatch, but it was worth spending a few hours on this work because the effect is great. Of course I divide all the elements that can be painted separately. There is not much of it in this model because even the number of wheels is very small compared to the other German vehicles. I clean everything with the model degreaser. Plastic, 3D printed elements, metal parts or tarps that I made myself. As soon as the product evaporated, I covered the metal parts with a metal primer from VMS. It's definitely worth doing this on all elements because it significantly improves the adhesion of the primer to their surface. I glued a nut with a long screw inside the model which will serve as a holder during work. A polished surface adheres better to plastic. I chose dark yellow from mission models as the base color, so I first covered the entire model with a grey primer from this manufacturer. A few thin coats did the job. Leaving the hull to dry, I started painting the wheels. Dark grey is the best color for painting rubber bandages and other rubber elements because it's a color that reflects the natural properties of this material. Rubber on vehicles is never black and painting it with this color is, in my opinion, wrong. I applied red oxide primer to the bottom of the hull and at the sides. I'm going to leave this color quite visible, which may not be consistent with historical realities, but it looks nice and adds interesting colors. I also painted a few wheels on the inside with this color for exactly the same reasons as the hull. For the camo colors I used dark brown and olive green. Generally I often use color differentiation between the chassis and the hull. That's why I followed this path here, and the wheels are painted with Mission Models paints and the hull and camo will be painted with AK acrylic paints. This causes the model to be non-uniform. I'm aware that in reality both parts of the vehicle were painted with the same paint, but once again I will repeat the principle known to some modelers that the appearance of the vehicle in reality transferred exactly to the scale will give the effect of a boring and flat model. That's why we need to remember about the scale effect and other tricks that will improve our models. This is just one of them. The wheels also have a base dark yellow color, and I apply exactly the same color to the entire model. As you can see, it's not some fancy painting, just a quick application of several thin layers. Of course I use an accelerator to dry faster. To avoid making mistakes while painting, I used profiles with Hetzer painting and tried to copy the arrangement of individual spots onto the model. I did it with a pencil, gently drawing the edges. This is probably the easiest way, at the same time the most effective. It's much easier to fill in ready-made contours than to maneuver a brush over a clean surface. First I painted the brown spots. Of course 2 layers were necessary to make the paint surface even and the color intense. I did exactly the same with the green color. Telling the truth, the whole process is quite time consuming, so it's worth putting on your favorite CD, making some coffee and only then getting down to work. And I will immediately answer a question that many of you would probably like to ask. I didn't use ready-made painting masks because I didn't have one at my disposal, and making my own would be much more time consuming than painting the entire camo with a brush. That's why I decided on this solution. Besides, I already have experience with painting camo in this way on a Hetzer after a model built a few years ago from an old Dragon kit. I painted the inner surfaces of the hatches with a mixture of white and German interior white. When painting like this, I always try to mask the model so as not to damage previously painted surfaces, which is very easy to do. Now I start painting additional elements that appear on the model. First, the towing cables. This time I painted them with tan earth with dark grey tips. Of course, this is the base color and the weathering will do its job. German field grey is the perfect color for tarps. Painting formed elements like this is quite time consuming, so you need to be patient and remember to penetrate all the nooks and crannies when painting. I painted the blanket and the remaining tarps with different shades, trying to keep them in rather calm colors. Due to the fact that the model is quite small, I managed to paint it quite quickly. Another thing worth mentioning is that the screws are painted silver, which you may know from my previous models. This brightens the surface and introduces the necessary contrast. The tracks were coated with my own color mix, which ends up being dark brown with a bit of silver and a drop of black. I covered the sides of the hull and the back with glossy varnish from VMS, and from some set I found in my collection I cut out the numbers that the best suited for me in the terms of size and appearance. I created an individual number and treated it with decal softener. Before I started working on the model, I removed the tracks and covered the whole miniature with glossy VMS varnish. Just a little note for all those who doubt the durability of clicking tracks. Now you can clearly see that despite constant work on them, they are still intact and don't tear. For me it's obvious that this method of connection is good enough for the needs of a static model. I covered almost all surfaces with varnish. I only tried to avoid exhaust because I had already done enough on it and now it no longer needs standard weathering. Okay, for wash I took the product from AK Interactive. Application is not a rocket science and I tried to focus on details and not put too much product on the model. However, for some time now I have been using wash to make streaks, so I often use the excess to spread it on surfaces. In the case of Hetzer, where the side walls and front are ideal surfaces for streaks, I spread the wash with a clean brush, creating vertical lines. Of course I need to enhance the effect here and there, so I built another layer. As you can see, I used the slightly dried product from the cup. It may not look professional, but I don't care that much. The final effect is important. It's the best if the stains are varied in terms of thickness and color intensity, then we will get the best results. Additionally, the wash can also be used to create dirty stains on surfaces. This I did on the flaps above the engine, where the dirt may have been more dominant than the stains because it was created, so to speak, by the actions of the crew. And here are the results after drying. The next work I did on the model was to paint the scratches. Generally, just like the amount of rust, I reduced this effect to a minimum on my models. This is the result of evolution in thinking and approach to the final appearance of the model. I found that on a scale this is definitely an exaggerated effect and you have to be very careful not to exaggerate with its amount. Of course, this is a very subjective approach and depends on individual feeling and taste. There are models with a million scratches and they still look good, but I can count the number of modelers getting it right on one hand. But back to the Hetzer. I painted some scratches on the inner surfaces of the hatches because these are the places most exposed to the crew's action and it's most visible in light colors. Additionally, I painted a dozen or so horizontal lines on the sides of the hull that imitate scratches from bushes and low trees. In addition, I played a bit with scratches on the flat surface of the wheels, but it was more to show you the effect because in a moment there will be some mud there, which will be much more visible than the minor scratches. Sometimes it happens that we do things that later disappear under subsequent layers. Finally, using the speckling technique, I placed tiny dots all over the model imitating very minor paint damage. In my opinion it looks very nice, but you need to remember to remove unnecessary traces from previously prepared places. In the case of my model, I mean tarps and machine gun or exhaust. A bit of oil paint is perfect for making the dirt harder. Now you can see very well on bright elements how much it changes the final appearance of a given part. It's worth considering in advance where the next level of paint will look good. I focus mainly on the places most frequently used by the crew, but also where dirt can accumulate and it's not wiped off. Of course, you can also strengthen previously made stains. I couldn't leave the wheels without getting them extra dirty. However, these are the elements that collect the most. Here you can see exactly how much the appearance of the surface changes after applying oil paint. Rust. Well, as I said earlier, it may be in really small amount and I will use it mainly around the side shield holders. A thin layer of matte VMS varnish to protect the entire work with oil paints. This is one of the best products I have ever had. After application the surface is really flat. Recently I received a set of new enamel liquid pigments to test them on my projects. I will now give them a chance to see what effect I can achieve on the painted surface of the model. From what I noticed, you can very easily create an accumulation of pigment in the nooks and crannies by using it as a pigment wash. This is quite useful, especially if we don't want to apply standard pigments. You can also apply several layers, but it's worth keeping in mind how much they will cover the base color. I applied dry pigment to the wet wheels, creating a three-dimensional effect of dried matte. Now the whole process is clearly visible. Please note that I don't cover the entire wheels with pigment, but mainly the edges. The whole dry matte was covered with white spirit. A soft pencil is perfect for polishing the edges. Additionally, I did some scratching on a few wheels with a tip of hobby knife. This is an interesting effect, especially if it coincides with previously painted scratches. In general, it's worth remembering that covering the wheels with just pigment or matte of any color can lead to a situation where all wheels will look the same. I know this is how it's in reality, but it will look boring and flat on the model. Therefore, it's worth adding effects on individual wheels to make them look different from each other. Scratches, mud, moisture, splashes, oil spills, all this will do the job. If you haven't done this, you should try it. It's worth to check how it will change the general appearance of the model. Of course, not too much, because less is better than more. Okay, the end of the philosophy. The sides of the hull also received a layer of liquid pigment, but more as a base for a standard pigment, which I used to build the appropriate structure in the same way as on the wheels. It's also worth remembering about the bottom of the hull, although it's not a visible element, but it's an integral part of the model. Now you can see how I made a good looking bottom of the model using several easy methods. Once again I decided to use enamel liquid pigment. Now we will see how they stack up on the tracks. I used two colors that I applied to the tracks in a random way. After drying with an accelerator, the effect is already visible and it looks very good in my opinion. A bit of standard pigment will add some nice dusty look. I won't preserve it in any way and I will even gently rub the entire track with my fingers. Polishing with a pencil all the places that are usually polished by wheels is very important. The road wheels and the idler and drive wheels have their own parts which are the best highlighted by such polishing. You can use an ordinary pencil of any hardness, but I prefer soft ones, even though they need to be sharpened very often. Well, of course, maybe it would be better to do it with gloves, but you know, I forgot to take them out of the box. Finally, I used the silicone tip to wipe the outer edges, spreading the graphite evenly on the surfaces. Fuel stains will be needed to paint various spills and stains throughout the model. My product is not the youngest, so I have to dilute it well. I will apply it to the entire hull, wheels, but also on the upper parts of the model. I painted all the balsa boards with Tamiya black paint. I didn't dilute it because I wanted it to cover the small holes in the balsa as much as possible. 2 layers will be enough. Just wait some time or use an accelerator and apply a second layer to build the appropriate color depth. Now you can watch how I paint the gate and the wall on its sides and how I prepare these elements for weathering. I hope I presented it clearly enough, but if you have any questions, please ask them in the comments. This time I didn't forget about the gloves. Applying all the chassis components once they are ready is always such a delicate job. On the one hand, I don't want to destroy the effect I created with pigments and other chemicals, and on the other hand, I want everything to turn out nice, even and quickly. Contrary to appearances, sometimes it comes out crooked and needs to be corrected. There are big mistakes, but there is no situation that cannot be overcome. I remember once putting on wheels and trucks and gluing them together. After a dozen or so minutes it turned out that I had the wrong truck sides. You can imagine what was happening and what interesting and joyful words were flying into the air. Well, that's the beauty of modeling life. I think that everyone I know can tell an interesting story from their workshop. When the general work with pigments in various forms was completed on the hull and chassis, I started finishing the details. First the towing cables. I added the dark wash, some dust and finally polished them with a pencil. With the pencil still in hand, I lightly rubbed a few of the edges, adding a bit of metallic look. The light received a bit of shiny varnish to make it look like it was glass. The machine gun was polished with metallic pigment. I considered adding a bit of dust, but I decided that there was already enough of it on the entire model. The side had also been worn down and now gleamed metallic against the dusty roof. Okay, not dusty yet, but it will be in a few seconds. The standard pigment came into action again, but this time on the higher parts of the model. I dusted some places and increased the contrast between individual elements. I added some splashes to the sides of the hull using heavily diluted oil paint. There was some black pigment on the exhaust tip. I know that exhaust doesn't look like this, but I always like this effect. Well, if you know my models, you probably know that the chain is one of my favorite accessories. I placed it together with the towing cables and glued it with sand and ballast freeze from VMS. A few drops will hold it in place without any problems. On the sides of the hull I swiped the blade of the hobby knife several times to make fresh scratches on the pigments that had been applied a few minutes earlier. I flattened them slightly by rubbing the marks with a dry brush. Finally, a bit of great addition, which for me is a thin wire tied to the hull walls and used to attach additional camouflage to vehicles. For this I used a 0.1mm wire from an old cable. For this purpose I used the handles that I had carefully bent in the first episode. This wire was previously soaked in metal blackening liquid, so I won't paint it now because it looks very natural. After lying, it's only visible from close up, and this means that I chose its thickness correctly. Wire that is too thick will ruin your entire previous painting job 100% of time. This is not up for discussion. And yes, I know it doesn't sound modest and someone will think I'm conceited. I don't care. This is what the entire project looks like when it's 100% complete. I'm very pleased with the effect, but I'm also fed up with Hetzers for a while. I think I showed the model in a simple but interesting way and told a story using a minimum of materials. Looking at this project, I have the impression that I did a good job meeting all the necessary conditions to create a good vignette. Please tell me what do you think in the comments. Don't forget to click like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. Also consider joining to the Patreon I mentioned earlier. Thanks for watching, that's all for today, see you next time, cheers!